Let's jump into a pretty heavy topic today, folks. Child soldiers. We've
Yeah.
got a ton of material to cover.
Hmm.
We've got news reports, expert analysis, and
Yeah.
even some really tough firsthand accounts.
Yeah, for sure.
The kind that really make you feel the human cost of conflict.
Yeah.
It's
Right. It's easy to get lost in the numbers.
yeah,
But we're talking about kids.
yeah.
Oftentimes, really, really young kids whose lives are just totally shattered by war.
Absolutely. And that's really our mission today, to kind of go beyond those headlines and
Mm.
really understand how children end up in the situation in the first place,
Yeah,
what the impact is on them, and what's being done to address it.
for sure.
I mean, we're talking about kids as young as 9
Yeah,
being forced to fight.
it's crazy.
It's almost impossible to comprehend.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately a global issue.
Yeah,
The UN has raised some real concerns about several countries where the situation is just terrible.
right.
Places like the Democratic Republic of Congo,
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria, Yemen,
Yeah.
South Sudan,
We have an episode from Al Jazeera that really highlights those rising numbers.
right?
It's pretty alarming. I mean, they mentioned that just in the first half of 2014, Boko Haram used 83 children as suicide bombers.
Wow.
I mean, just let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah,
83 kids.
it's a really stark reminder of how children are just expendable in these conflicts.
Yeah.
Their vulnerability is exploited,
Mm-hmm.
and their lives are just treated as disposable.
So why children?
Yeah.
What leads them to become soldiers in the first place?
Well, it's rarely just one thing. It's usually this really complex web of circumstances.
Yeah.
But some common threads kind of come out of the research we looked at and the firsthand accounts we've gathered.
Uh,
Um, Rachel Taylor, who's an expert we interviewed for the Al Jazeera piece,
okay.
points to poverty as a major driver.
Right.
When families are just struggling to survive, the promise of, food, shelter, or even a small income
Right.
can be enough to push a child towards an armed group.
It's like they're being forced to choose between starvation and violence.
Yeah,
No child should ever have to face that decision.
exactly. And it's not just poverty.
Yeah,
Lack of education, limited job opportunities.
right.
These all play a significant role, too.
Yeah.
If a child can't see a future for themselves, joining an arms group can seem like the only way to gain a sense of purpose
Yeah.
or belonging.
There's this point that Rachel Taylor makes about the breakdown of family structures
Oh, yeah.
that I thought was really insightful.
Yeah.
When communities are just ravaged by war, families are often torn apart,
Yeah.
and that leaves children really vulnerable to manipulation and recruitment.
Yeah, you can imagine how appealing the idea of a new family
Right.
within an armed group might seem to a child who's lost everything.
It's tragic.
It is.
It's a manipulation of their basic human need for connection and security.
Right.
And sadly, it goes even deeper than that.
It does. In some cases, armed groups actually deliberately target communities for destruction.
Wow.
They know that by breaking down these societal structures
Mm-hmm.
and creating chaos, they're going to make children even more vulnerable to recruitment.
Oh, wow.
It's a horrifyingly calculated strategy.
So it's not just a matter of, children being drawn in, often actively targeted
Yeah,
and manipulated into joining these groups.
absolutely. And once they're in their lives, are transformed in ways that are almost impossible to fathom.
Yeah, we have some truly harrowing firsthand accounts that really shed light on what life is actually like as
Yeah.
a child soldier.
These accounts come from interviews featured in LA Bible, CNN,
Okay.
and The Strombo Show. And what's striking is the consistency of their experiences,
Yeah.
despite being from different conflicts and backgrounds.
Yeah, there's this recurring theme of forced recruitment.
Mhm.
And so many of these children are abducted from their homes or schools, often at gunpoint.
Just imagine being ripped away from your family, from everything you know and love,
Yeah.
and thrust into this world of violence and brutality.
It's just
The trauma is almost unimaginable.
and the training they're subjected to.
Yeah.
It's designed to break them down, to strip away their humanity and turn them into killing machines.
The Art Bible interview includes a chilling description of how they were forced to dig escape tunnels under enemy fire
Oh, wow.
to cope with the fear and pain they were given marijuana.
It's a deliberate process of desensitization.
Yeah.
They're exposed to violence, forced to participate in it,
Right.
and drugged to numb the emotional and physical pain.
It's a systematic dismantling of their childhoods,
Yeah.
replacing it with this twisted sense of loyalty and obedience to the armed group.
The CNN piece focuses specifically on the DRC
Mm-hmm.
and a particularly brutal militia called the FDLR.
Oh, yeah, they're notorious for using child soldiers, and their methods are just horrific.
It's a
This highlights how the specific conflict and the ideology of the armed group
Yeah,
can further exacerbate the horrors faced by these children.
right.
Some groups are known for being particularly cruel,
Yeah.
exploiting children in even more horrific ways.
I mean, it's hard to imagine anything more brutal, but what happens when a child does manage to escape this nightmare?
Right.
What's the road to recovery like?
Yeah, it's certainly not easy.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there are organizations like UNICEF and the UN
Right.
that are working tirelessly to negotiate the release of child soldiers.
Yeah, the Strombo and CNN pieces both touch on that, and
Uh,
it sounds like incredibly delicate work.
it is.
I mean, how do you even approach a group like the FDLR and say, "Hey, we want our kids back"?
Right. It requires a deep understanding of the dynamics within these groups,
Yeah,
the motivations of their leaders, the pressures they're facing.
right.
It's not just about barging in and demanding releases.
Right.
Often it involves building trust,
Yeah.
finding common ground, and sometimes even leveraging outside influences to make it happen.
Strombo's piece had this really interesting anecdote about UNICEF workers in Sierra Leone.
Oh, yeah.
They purposely wore casual clothes
Interesting.
during negotiations
Yeah.
to appear less intimidating and more approachable.
Wow.
And get this, it actually worked.
That's great.
They were able to secure the release of numerous children.
It's a reminder that even in the most dire situations,
Yeah.
creativity and a willingness to think outside the box can make a real difference.
Yeah, but even when a child is freed, the journey is far from over.
No, it's
Right, because the scars run deep.
yeah,
It's not like they can just flip a switch and go back to being normal kids.
exactly. The psychological trauma is immense.
Right.
Charles, who's featured in the Al Jazeera episode,
Yeah.
works with former child soldiers in Sierra Leone.
Okay.
And he paints a pretty bleak picture.
Yeah.
These kids often struggle with nightmares.
Right.
Flashbacks, difficulty trusting adults, and they can even exhibit violent tendencies.
It's just...
They've been robbed of their childhoods and forced to confront horrors no one should ever see.
And on top of all that, they have to deal with the practical challenges of reintegrating into society.
Oh, absolutely.
Many lack basic education and job skills,
Right.
which makes it nearly impossible to build a stable life.
It's a tragic irony.
Yeah.
Many former child soldiers end up back in armed groups because they simply have no other options.
Right.
They've been traumatized, neglected, and ultimately failed by the very systems that should be there to protect them.
So where do we go from here?
Right.
How do we break this cycle and prevent children from becoming soldiers in the first place?
Well, international treaties are a crucial starting point.
Okay.
The Al Jazeera episode mentions one that specifically bans child soldier recruitment,
Okay.
and a promising 167 countries have signed it.
That's got to be a good sign, right?
It is, but the reality is that implementation and enforcement remain major hurdles.
Right.
It's one thing to put your name on a piece of paper. It's another to actually put those words into action,
So treaties alone aren't enough.
right?
What else can be done?
Well, Ishmael Bia,
Okay.
who was a child soldier himself in Sierra Leone, offers a powerful example of how individual stories can spark change.
Yeah.
He's featured in both the Al Jazeera and Strombo pieces,
Mm-hmm.
and his journey is incredible.
Didn't he write a book about his experiences?
He did. It's called A Long Way Gone,
Oh, wow.
and it's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the child soldier experience from a first-hand perspective.
Wow.
He talks about how he found solace in writing,
Right.
and now uses his experience to raise awareness and advocate for other children affected by war.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit.
That's incredibly inspiring. So one person's story can actually have a global impact.
Absolutely, sharing these personal experiences can humanize the issue, challenge stereotypes, and inspire others to take action.
Okay, so we've got international treaties, we've got personal stories, and organizations like UNICEF working on the ground.
Right.
What else is needed to really make a dent in this problem?
I think addressing the root causes is key.
Yeah,
We've talked about poverty, lack of education, and the breakdown of family structures.
right.
Those are complex issues that require long-term solutions,
Yeah.
but they can't be ignored.
So it's not just about getting kids out of armed groups.
Right.
It's about creating a world where they don't feel compelled to join them in the first place.
Exactly. Investing in education, creating economic opportunities, and strengthening community support systems.
Right.
These are all essential pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, it sounds like a massive undertaking, but it feels like we got to start somewhere.
Yeah,
We can't just turn a blind eye to these kids.
absolutely. And well, we've focused a lot on Sierra Leone and the DRC.
Right.
This is happening all over the world.
Yeah.
You know that Journeyman Pictures documentary you sent over?
Yeah.
It's a stark look at the civil war in South Sudan.
Yeah.
And it's the same story, different setting.
Right.
Easy access to weapons,
Right.
crushing poverty, kids with no hope for the future.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for
And,
disaster.
and it's not just boys being forced into combat either.
Right.
That Human Rights Watch report, you included the one about girls being exploited as soldiers.
Oh, yeah,
It was really tough to read.
it is.
Not only are they facing the same dangers as the boys,
Yeah.
but they're often subjected to sexual violence as well.
It's
Just horrific.
it's another layer of exploitation.
Yeah.
And it highlights the specific vulnerabilities that girls face in these conflict zones.
Right.
It's something we can't afford to ignore.
And then there's the Carte Blanche episode, the one about gang violence in South Africa.
Right.
I have to admit that one hit close to home for me.
Yeah.
To think that kids as young as 9 are being pulled into gangs,
It's crazy.
forced to commit crimes, and exposed to violence.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
It's a reminder that child soldiery isn't limited to war-torn countries.
Right.
These dynamics can take root anywhere.
Yeah.
That poverty, inequality, and lack of opportunity create a breeding ground for desperation.
Yeah.
Whether it's a conflict zone in Africa or a gang-ridden neighborhood in South Africa, the underlying factors are often the same.
So no matter where it happens, these kids are being robbed of their childhoods.
Yeah.
Forced to grow up too fast, exposed to trauma that would scar most adults for life.
And that shared experience, that theft of innocence, is what unites these children.
Yeah.
Whether they're in the DRC, South Sudan, or South Africa, they've been denied the chance to simply be kids.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of it.
That's
But what keeps me going are the stories of resilience.
Yep.
The individuals who escape, rebuild their lives, and then dedicate themselves to helping others.
Yeah.
And the organizations that never give up, working tirelessly to make a difference.
Those stories are vital.
Yeah.
They remind us that change is possible, that hope still exists.
Right.
But it's not going to happen on its own.
Right.
It requires a collective effort.
So what can we do?
Yeah.
Where do we even start?
For me, it comes down to awareness and action.
Okay.
Don't underestimate the power of simply talking about this issue, sharing information with your friends and family, raising awareness online.
Yeah.
The more people who know about it, the more pressure we can put on governments and organizations to actually do something.
Right, because if enough people care, then maybe those in power will be forced to take notice.
Exactly. And then there's direct action,
Okay.
supporting organizations like Child Soldiers International, donating to UNICEF's child protection programs,
Right.
even just writing a letter to your elected officials.
Yeah.
These actions might seem small,
Yeah.
but they can add up to real change.
It's like that saying, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
And each one of us has the potential to be part of that group.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
I want them to remember that this isn't someone else's problem.
Yeah.
It's a human problem, and it demands a human solution.
Right.
We can all play a role in ending the exploitation of children in conflict.
Yeah.
Every voice raised, every dollar donated, every conversation started, it all makes a difference.
That's a powerful message. Thanks for guiding us through this incredibly important and challenging topic.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
And to you listening, thank you for taking the time to learn more about this issue. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to take action to be part of the solution. Remember, even the smallest ripples can create waves of change. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.